Hello again. It's quite an exciting time of year because the days are getting longer. Well, the daylight hours are getting longer. The clocks changed in the USA a week or two ago, and they'll change in Europe this coming weekend, and therefore there's more daylight hours in the evenings. Of course, that comes with its dangers. There's lots of temptation to work harder, ride longer, run longer, and use up our energy in different ways. So the demands on our energy are changing, and we have to be a bit careful about that. So there's things like Strava, so I've got a list here. So there's things like Strava segments, hills to hammer up outside, whereas, okay, you do the sprints on Zwift or the indoor trainer, but it's a bit different, isn't it? And you might be out with a friend, and if you're racing them directly, if you can touch them or see them disappearing off into the distance, it's a bit different to just seeing an avatar riding away from you. And then you might join in group rides. You might be doing these midweek time trials starting in May in the UK. So that's like a race, and you might race at the weekend. You might do a race midweek, and you might ride longer. You might, because the weather's better, ride and you stop at cafes and then do a bit more. So the volume and the intensity of what you're doing can increase quite rapidly at this time of year. And as a consequence, your level of fatigue can suddenly take a dip because you're at a bit of risk of overtraining. Well, maybe you're sensible. Some people are. Maybe you're immune to overdoing it, but most of us are fairly normal and get a bit excited when we get outside and don't have to wear so much kit to keep warm. And what usually happens is, because you're doing a bit more and your body responds to that extra stimulus, then you actually can get a bit of a boost in fitness when you start doing more training. Particularly, there's sort of a bit more high intensity work in a different way, and it can lead to a boost in fitness. But if you use that boost in fitness to keep working harder and harder, as I've probably talked about in previous videos, then you'll just end up, you're doing too much hard work, you're doing more volume, and therefore you'll just get tired and overtrained, and that might be the end of your season. As an aside, one thing that quite often happens is if you've been on a training camp, it's quite common to have a bit of a dip in enthusiasm and motivation, partly because you've done a lot of hard work and you're tired and you need to recover from that, and that when you're tired, your mood changes. But also because you've been out in the sunshine and you come back and it's normal weather. So like the UK, one of my clients has just been away to the south of France, and he lives in Norway, so he's back to a dump of snow. So you just have to be a bit careful with that. But that's not really what we're talking about here. It's just an aside to inform you and just keep an eye out for that sort of thing if you go on a training camp. So you can get this, if you go over top, you get a boost in fitness, you start riding harder. It's easy to boost power outside for most people, so it seems like your FTP is going up and your fitness is improving, but maybe it's not really. Your neuromuscular ability, your actually skill at riding the bike improves very rapidly, and therefore you get faster at your circuits that you've not been doing all winter. So you need to be careful. I've said that several times. I can't really say it enough. In endurance sport, success is dependent on consistency, and to be consistent, you have to be careful and not overdo it, and therefore you can keep training and keep getting better. So how do you deal with this time of year? Well, it's worth having a loose plan, and that's whether you're working with a coach or you're training yourself or you've got a training plan. And that loose plan might be to just have 3 hard sessions a week. And the hard session might be a high intensity session, like an interval session, sort of tempo endurance. You'll have heard me talk about those. So you work hard on the climbs and you recover on downhills, ride endurance on the flats. They're sort of medium distance rides usually, or it might be a long ride. So anything really that you need a significant amount of time to recover from, anything that you're going to feel tired the next day from, that's, I guess, a good rule of thumb. So the plan would be to have just 3 of these hard sessions each week, and then fill everything else out with low intensity training. And stick with a routine whereby you do a similar thing on a similar day each week. That routine might change because the summer schedule, if you train with a club, if you're in a club, their summer schedule might be different to the winter schedule. Claire runs with the Vernay Adventure Running Club here, and over the winter months they have an interval session, so they've got a high intensity training session on a Wednesday evening, and then when the clocks change, when they get more daylight in the evenings, they go for a long run. So as a consequence, the emphasis of that day has changed. But of course it still could be quite a hard session. For her it's not, because the intensity drops so much that she has to add in another interval session. And this is important whether you're on the bike or running. So she has to change her weekly schedule to accommodate the change in the club structure. And of course, if you're on a bike, there might be a chain gang that starts up when the evenings get a bit longer, and therefore that's a hard session. So you don't want to really be trying to do a hard chain gang ride of 40 miles or what's that, 60 kilometres, as well as your interval session. You need to substitute something, so you need to knock something out. So your weekly structure might change, but try and work with a weekly structure. A good strategy when you move to doing more outdoor riding is to actually back off the intensity a bit. So maybe if you were doing 2 interval sessions a week and 1 long ride or 1 long run, it might be better to drop back to 1 interval session a week and 1 long ride or run, or 2 long rides or runs per week. And in that way you can build up a base and some resilience for being outdoors. And then if you're actually increasing the volume, which I know a lot of you are ultra endurance cyclists, so you might take the opportunity to get out for some longer rides in better weather with more daylight. You've increased the volume, which means you've done like another base period. And then once you've done that, once the overall volume of your training stabilised, you can start to build back in the intensity. So you might still get back to your 2 interval sessions and 1 long ride or run a week. Or you might decide to do some weekends, you might do some back-to-back long rides or runs if you're training for ultra endurance events like a lot of you are doing. In that way you've made a gradual transition from indoor training, which might be a little bit more high intensity but low volume, to something that is higher volume and a similar level of intensity, but you've done it gradually rather than increasing intensity and volume at the same time and risking overtraining. You can then start to be more specific about your event. So if you say you're doing an ultra endurance or bikepacking type race, you might want to start scheduling some multi-day rides where you do several days and either camp out or stay in a hotel if the weather's still not good enough for camping out, and have recovery periods around that. If you're training for other events that are more high intensity, or you need to improve your FTP because you've easily got you can do the durations, you can ride your daily schedule, your 12 or your 16 hours a day, and recover and continuously do that. You're looking to build your FTP to get your average speed up. Then you can start doing your 2 threshold sessions a week, or 1 threshold and 1 VO2 max type sessions, or start to build in the tempo work as you get close to your event. So as the weather continues to improve and you get close to your events, you can become more specific. But at least you've made a safe transition from spending a lot of time on the indoor trainer to spending perhaps a little bit more time outside, and that's the important thing, because that facilitates this consistency that you need and leads to your success. So like most things in training, it's not complicated. You just need to give it a bit of thought, use a bit of common sense, be sensible. But remember, it's about having fun, and if the weather's better, you want to push it a bit now and again, so don't worry too much about that. Just try and keep to these 3 hard sessions a week and you'll be fine. I hope that makes sense. I hope it's helpful. Subscribe and like if you like it. Obviously don't subscribe and don't like if you don't like it. And I'll see you in the next video. Bye.